Ladies and welcome to this very pleasant place. Now, not only is this a most beautiful garden, and indeed it is that, this is a very significant place, too, because it's here. It's right here. The famous, world-famous Canadian company had its beginnings, in 1858, to be exact. The world of Hiram Walker. Now, of course, that's not just the name of the company. That was the name of a most unique individual. A man who I'm sure was toasted on many social occasions, such as the one we just depicted for you. And with good reason. With very good reason. Ah, Hiram, my dear sir, you really started something. Yes, you certainly did. You see, surrounding this peaceful garden, the largest distillery in Canada is humming away. Grain's being milled, meal is being cooked, and mash is fermenting. Hundreds of people are coming and going and adding their skills to the process. But here, on the lawns behind the main office building in this formal garden, one can stop for a while and think of the legacy left by that determined man of vision and ambition. Quite a lad was Hiram. He was restless, always looking for challenges. He was also a doer. So at 22, it was westward home. And the devil take the hindmost, the way I hear it. He landed in Detroit, over there, in 1838. Now, that's 10 years before the telegraph. That's 16 years before the railway. At first, he was apprenticed in a grocery store. And then, before very long, he opened his own store. Then later on, he became a grain merchant. Yes, my friends, grain. That's the substance, that's the dry gold with which a distiller starts. Now, before you start, you have to find the grain, and plenty of it nearby, or else some method of bringing it in. You have to be able to find abundant fresh water. And finally, you have to be able to find or develop the skilled hands who can help you to do the job right.
Hiram Walker looked, and since the on-again, off-again temperance laws of the day prevented him from starting at home, Detroit, and since land costs were so much more attractive across the river is where he started, Canada. Hiram never was a follower. He preferred to go his own way. Could have been his stubborn streak, or just plain business genius, we don't really know. But we do know the results. In 1856, Hiram Walker bought his first land in Canada, and a year later, he was in business. Flour, feed, soon after, whiskey, Canadian whiskey. In those early days, no one branded their whiskeys, or anything else for that matter. If you wanted whiskey, you took your own jug or bottle to the local store and had it filled from the barrel. Hiram Walker didn't like that idea. His whiskey was light, pure, and superior. It was good whiskey, and he wanted folks to know who made it. His first move to ensure that they did was to put it in special barrels and brand his name into the head. Branded whiskey, the first. Gentlemen belonging to the finer clubs and patrons of better hotels of the era were regularly enjoying Hiram Walker's whiskey. So that's what he called it, Club. Hence the first club whiskey. You may have noticed the bottle from which I poured in our little opening scenario. That was the original Club whiskey label. Club whiskey was bottled and sealed. Again, an innovation. There it was, Fine whiskey with a name all its own and sold in a new once-only bottle that a man could get his hand around, call his own. It became a favorite.
So much so that in 1882, when Hiram introduced his brand into the United States, some of our neighbors to the south there became a little bit concerned that some Americans may be misled into thinking that they were buying good American whiskey. So they petitioned Washington to require that Walker stated very clearly on the label that his product was Canadian. So the word Canadian was added to the word club. Canadian Club was born, and it all worked to Hiram's advantage because Canadians accepted it as their own, and Americans started buying it as a very special product, and special indeed it was. So Canadian Club began to cultivate an amazing popularity all around the world. The Canadian Club legacy was launched, and it prospered. It still does. Perhaps beyond the far-reaching dreams of Hiram himself. You see, he left us more than just a very fittingly successful whiskey. He began a company that maintains an ongoing legacy of tradition and of quality. Not only with Canadian Club brand, but in other brands, names known all over the world, names like Ballantine's, Courvoisier, Kahlua. What he did was begin a company with a time-honored reputation for business integrity. I'd like to show you around. Come.
Hiram Walker's legacy includes beautiful architecture, as in this, the main office building. Constructed in 1894 in the 16th century Italian Renaissance style he so loved. It is further reflected in Willisstead, the residence built for his eldest son, and now a tribute to the elegance of old Walkerville. St. Mary's Church, built by Hiram Walker's sons and dedicated to the memory of their mother, is another landmark left by a devoted family.
Hiram Walker died in 1899. And for many years, the company was successfully operated by his sons, by his grandsons. Then in 1926, a man named Harry Hatch, himself an entrepreneur of note and an expert distiller, purchased the company, and under his guidance and that of his successors, the Canadian Club legacy grew and prospered. And today, it's from this very plant in Walkerville, the Canadian Club is exported to 150 countries throughout the world, where it's known as the best in the house. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the house where it all started. Well, you've seen many areas now where the influence of things past remains with us. Now, we'd like to invite you into the present, to see that while we keep faith with the traditions of a man named Hiram Walker, technology has been harnessed and put to work to smooth the path of that legacy from grain to glass. Club whiskey as it was, and Canadian Club as it is. The legacy lives on and moves forward.
Canadian Club begins with nature's own grains, rye, rye malt, corn, and barley malts. The grains arrive at the Walker plant by trucks, boats, and by rail. But when that grain arrives, it goes not an inch farther until it's passed several exacting quality controls. Samples of incoming shipment are checked for weight. Was it a healthy crop? Moisture content is gauged, foreign material looked for, and the quality of the grain is judged. Only when the shipment has passed all the tests is it allowed to become the raw material for the making of Canadian Club. The shipment is then dumped and transferred to the rapidly moving belt, which carries it tons and tons at a time into 90-foot-high storage units, the grain silos. Here, the grain is kept clean and dry. When required at the distillery, the grain is transferred from the grain elevator by a unique and powerful vacuum system. The grain's next stop on its way to becoming whiskey is the milling process. The mills grind up the grain, thereby exposing the starch within the kernel. The exposed starch is more soluble in the cooking process. The size of the particles after milling is most important, so a constant quality control check is kept at the milling stage as well. In whiskey making, the cooking process, also known as mashing, by the way, dissolves the starches within the grain, and with the help of natural enzymes, these starches are reduced to fermentable sugars. In other words, they are converted. While this milling, mashing, and converting is going on, something else is being produced in another part of the building: yeast. Yeasts, and there are many types of them, are single-celled microorganisms, having the ability of converting simple sugars to alcohol and flavor components. Not all yeasts are suitable or desirable to a distiller. Those which are demand one ultimate requirement: they must be clean yeasts, absolutely free of other yeasts or any microorganisms. Now, a yeast good enough to make whiskey is one thing. A yeast good enough to make Canadian Club is something else. Here at the yeast laboratories in the Walkerville distillery, microbiologists and lab technicians work to produce the one yeast that goes into the making of Canadian Club. That single yeast strain, the only one of its kind in the world, is actually descended from cultures first prepared by Hiram Walker in the 1860s. Sealed in a test tube, it's been guarded over the years and used to reproduce more of its kind for today's Canadian Club. The grain mash and yeast are combined in the fermentor. Now fermentation begins. By the action of the yeast cells, the sugars present in the converted mash are changed into alcohol and flavor components. The process continues for 3 to 5 days. The grain has been milled and mashed, its starches converted, the yeast added, and the batch fermented. Now, whiskey begins to be whiskey. It is distilled. Distilling whiskey involves the process of heating the fermented mixture until it boils and extracting the vapors, which contain a high degree of alcohol and flavor components. When these vapors are cooled, condensation occurs and the result is new whiskey. The lighter the whiskey desired, the more complex the drawing off process. Canadian Club is one of the lightest whiskeys in the world because it's a blend of distilled and redistilled whiskeys. Virtually all impurities are removed, leaving only the distinct flavor components. These remaining new whiskeys are smooth and pure. After distillation is completed, what remains in the still is a spent mash called stillage. At Hiram Walker, the water is removed and this dried grain residue, now rich in protein, vitamins, and minerals, is transferred into a huge holding warehouse. Later, it will be purchased by farmers as a cattle and poultry feed supplement. Canadian Club is a blend of whiskeys. Each whiskey has its own distinct flavor, depending upon the original mash and the congeners formed during fermentation and distillation. To ensure that every new bottle of Canadian Club is identical in flavor, bouquet, and quality to every one before it, the skilled touch of meticulous blending is required. Canadian Club is blended before it is barreled. That way, the different flavors and characteristics of the new whiskeys can age and mellow together. Always consistent, always Canadian Club. And so, to sleep for several years. The new whiskey which went into these barrels was clear and colorless. Only after maturing in these charred oak barrels will Canadian Club take on its mellow amber hue. Time to wake up. Old enough, mellow enough, good enough. Canadian Club has come of age. Before bottling, Canadian Club is tested just as it comes from the barrel. Hiram Walkers' organoleptic panel is made up of trained staff members from all divisions of the company. Organoleptic means evaluation via the senses, and indeed only the human senses of taste, smell, and sight can best judge a fine whiskey. Here, on the Canadian Club bottling line, tradition meets technology. The final result of skillful whiskey making, careful blending, and proper aging fills the clean amber glass with the sparkle of speed and precision. Some of this fine product will find its way into your home and mine. Much of it, too, is slated for export to countries all over the world. Canadian Club, a true descendant of Canadian heritage and a proud representative of the whiskey maker's art and excellence, is enjoyed by the residents of many nations and is like a taste of home to those of us who visit abroad. Yes, Canadian Club, like many Canadian citizens, has become quite a world traveler. But no matter where one travels in the world, there's nothing like coming home to enjoy Canadian Club in its homeland. Here at the reception center of the Walker facility, there's a room called the Canadian Club Room. On your way there, you pass a magnificent collection of Canadian artifacts, chosen in fact to represent all parts of Canada, rather than any one local area. Art which is representative of many forms, many styles, from the traditional through modern and avant-garde to the beautiful sculptures of our own native peoples.
Hi, Tom. Debbie, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Beautiful evening. Yeah, they have the facilities, you know, the sauna and like relax.
Ah, there you are. Isn't all of this really quite magnificent? This room has hosted many a visitor since the reception center was built. The hospitality of the Hiram Walker organization continues to be extended to visitors from all around the world, as well as the folks right here at home. Oh, thank you. It's the Walker way of continuing a tradition begun so many years ago, of reflecting the legacy of a fine product that had its beginnings right here on these grounds, Canadian Club. I can't help but think that if Hiram Walker were here with us tonight, he'd be very, very proud, and with good reason. So let's end this visit the way we began it. Ladies and gentlemen, to Hiram Walker.